The Hand is one of Marvel's oldest and most influential villain organizations, showing up in several different books such as the X-Men, Wolverine, and of course Elektra and Daredevil. They were adapted into the MCU during the Netflix era of Marvel TV shows, featuring heavily in Daredevil and Iron Fist before they were seemingly defeated in the Defenders. Whether or not you consider those shows canon before, they very much are at this point, with its characters even crossing over to the movies recently, particularly Spider-Man movies, which is fitting. Matt Murdock had a small role in Spider-Man No Way Home back in 2021, and now Brand New Day is bringing in not only the Punisher, but the Hand as well. So let's take a look back at them, and see what worked, and, well, what didn't. In the MCU, the Hand originates from the mythical city of Kunlun, home of the Iron Fist. The Order of the Crane Mother, aka the monks that lived there, spent centuries studying the secrets of the Chi and how to use it to heal. However, 5 of them wanted instead to use it to cheat death, which the other monks did not vibe with, at all. So they were banished from Kunlun and have since lived in the shadows, influencing crimes, wars, and using powerful people as pawns in their schemes. Their true goal has always been, well, mostly vague. We know they wanted immortality. Like I said, the founding members were banished from Kunlun centuries ago, meaning they obviously achieved it, as they were all still kicking in modern day during the Defenders. They're each in charge of one faction within the Hand, all of which have their own role within the organization. Murakami was in charge of the Warriors, as in the actual ninjas you think of when you think of the Hand. His faction is actually the first one we get to meet. Back in Daredevil Season 1, we meet Nobu, who was under his command. Then we meet Madame Gao, who secured funding for the organization, mostly through her drug trade. We saw her in Daredevil and Iron Fist. Bakuto, who we also meet in Iron Fist, was in charge of recruiting and training those recruits to be a part of the Hand. Not all of them would end up as warriors, but the ones that stood out were presumably sent to Murakami for further training. There's also Alexandra, who we meet in the Defenders, and she was in charge of the corporate side of things, in addition to being the actual leader of the Hand. Like, all those guys received orders from her. And last but not least, there's Sowande, who... Wait, what does he do? Oh, they never explained it? Like, at all? Anyway, as you can see, each of their roles make sure the organization runs smoothly. And I guess Sowande is there too. It's all well and good, the roles for each founder seem to fit together pretty well, if only the show didn't imply they haven't gotten along in centuries and have mostly been doing their own thing ever since. Sometimes even actively working against each other. Yeah, I don't know what that's about. I've been trying to make sense of their lore for years now, like even before I started this channel, and it's really confusing. Speaking of things that are confusing, in the MCU, the Hand sort of worships this being called the Black Sky. I'm not sure if worships is the right word here because we never find out what a Black Sky actually is, or why it's so important to them. The first Black Sky we meet is this kid Nobu brought into New York back in Daredevil Season 1. He even had Fisk pull a lot of strings to make sure his arrival would have been secured. It didn't work out, of course. Daredevil and Stick learned about it, and Stick killed the kid to prevent the Hand from having a Black Sky, whatever that would mean. That kid was not the only Black Sky though, because in Season 2, we meet another one. And one that's far more important to the story for a lot of reasons, Elektra Nachos. Look how they massacred my girl. Elektra died though, soon after finding out about this, like she does. And since the Black Sky is so important, for a reason or another, the Hand, or specifically Alexandra, decided to bring her back to life. The Hand's ability to bring people back from the dead is very important to them in the comics, so of course it was adapted into the show, though a little bit differently. In the comics, this power comes from the Beast, a demon they worship. Unlike the Black Sky, we do get some lore about the Beast, what it is, why it matters, and the Black Sky is just not something that exists. The comic lore could be a whole video on its own, because there was actually very little that made it into the MCU, but I'll save it for another time. Anyway, the MCU doesn't have the Beast, or at least we didn't hear about it back in the Netflix era. And the way that they brought people back to life was actually using something that they called the Substance. We know very little about it, except that it's extracted from dragon bones, which is a limited resource. This is why they need to stay in power. I mean, if their goal is immortality, they need to have a way to find and extract the substance. So they need to be well connected in order to do that, and well funded in order to pull it off. This way, they can make sure that whenever they find a dead dragon, they can get to it and extract the substance so they can ensure their immortality. And having some ninjas to do the sneaky, dirty work when needed can't hurt either. None of this is explicitly said in the show, by the way. I just deduced it from thinking about it for 5 minutes, which sometimes I fear might be more than the writers ever did, because the confusing lore about all the faction is just part of the problem. For example, I just said that the substance is a limited resource, right? And yet, it's established that they have used it on people who were not one of them. People with influence, to be fair, who they could manipulate into doing their bidding. People like Harold Meacham. Yeah, I know none of you watched Iron Fist, don't worry, I got you. Harold was terminally ill when he was approached by Madame Gao, who offered to cure him from his death, meaning bringing him back to life, if he agreed to help her and her organization through the company that he had with his friend, Wendell Rand. Harold agreed, and the first order of business was getting rid of Wendell, as well as his wife Heather and his son, Danny. So they orchestrated a plane crash, and the Rands went missing, presumed dead. Of course, that's not the full story. Danny survived and became the Iron Fist, protector of Kunlun, the immortal weapon, the sworn enemy of the Hand. Anyway, Harold became CEO of Rand Enterprises. Soon after, he died from his illness, and the Hand brought him back to life, as promised, a few days later. From here, he was forced to live in hiding. Nobody could know that he was alive unless the Hand decided they needed to. That was the case for his assistant, whose name I forget, and his son, Ward, who ended up doing all the dirty work at Rand Enterprises following orders from Harold. And so, for the next 15 or so years, by manipulating his own son, Harold kept Gao's heron trade running in New York by using Rand ports and warehouses to facilitate distribution. All of this to say, the Hand chose to bring Harold back, using this rare, limited resource that they need in order to survive as an organization. So my question is, why? Why waste it on people who are not part of the Hand? People who could and did become a liability, when they could have, in this instance, maybe just threatened Ward instead. Cut out the middleman. Maybe use his sister as leverage. I don't know. Like I said, I feel like I'm putting more thought into this than they did. Anyway, their main plot throughout these shows is trying to get more of the substance. All the way back in Daredevil Season 1, they were interested in a particular block in Hell's Kitchen, the one where Mrs. Cardenas lived. If you don't remember, her landlord was forcing her and her neighbors out of their homes, but she didn't want to do that, so she went to Nelson Murdoch for legal help dealing with that landlord, who soon sold all his properties to none other than Wilson Fisk. Fisk had some dealings with the Hand through Nobu, who we talked about earlier. Nobu was really insistent on getting control over that particular block. He didn't want another one, he didn't want to negotiate something else, he wanted that one particular block. In order to take care of it, Fisk arranged to have Mrs. Cardenas killed, and later gave the properties to the Hand as promised. Going into Season 2, the Hand had teared down all that was there in order to build Midland Circle, a corporate building that served not only as the Hand's headquarters right in the heart of New York, but most importantly, a front for their actual goals within that block, digging a really big hole. As it turns out, there's a dragon buried under New York, and they needed access to Mrs. Cardenas' block in order to reach it. You may remember that they extract the substance from dragon bones. And at that point, they were starting to get a little desperate, because this super important, super limited resource was running out. Probably because they kept using it on random CEOs instead of, rationing it properly. Not only that, but they used the last bit of the substance that they had to bring Elektra back to life, since, she's so important, for some reason. And because of that, they, as in the founders, were running the risk of actually dying. Because then, if they die and there's no more substance, they can't bring themselves back. Pretty simple, right? Only, here's another inconsistency. Harold only needed the substance once. After that, he kept resurrecting automatically unless he was decapitated. So, why are the founders terrified of it running out? Have they never died before? That seems unlikely. Also, we know that once someone is brought back, they're different. Like, part of their memories don't come back with them. Harold became more ruthless after he returned the second time. Elektra took a while to gain her memories back from before her death. But the founders seem to be doing pretty well. So, is that why they need the substance? Can they work around that issue by doing the ritual again each time that they die? I feel like that would be reasonable, but who knows? There's a lot to be said about how the Hand has been adapted so far. As far as Daredevil's Rogues Gallery goes, the Hand are not my favorites, and their MCU version didn't really do them any favors. There were clearly a lot of ideas floating around, many of which are actually pretty good, but they never fully connected in any meaningful way. So we ended up with something that kinda works, but it still leaves a lot of unanswered questions. It made things confusing and frustrating to try and make sense of, even more so than in the comics, which is saying something. One thing that I always thought was holding them back from a decent story with the Hand is the obsession that these shows had with realism. They were proposed as this grittier look into the MCU. You know, the heroes in it were not fighting robots or aliens, but threats that were more grounded in reality. Like corrupt businessmen, crime bosses, people who want control more than anything else. Kilgrave is still one of the most terrifying Marvel villains. He's a little too real, if you think about it. And his portrayal in Season 1 of Jessica Jones was excellent. I'm not here to argue that their commitment to realism was a bad thing. It's why I wanted to watch those shows to begin with. The thing is, when they decided to introduce ninjas and resurrections into the mix, it kinda complicated things. They didn't want to lean into the supernatural aspect of it, because that might sacrifice the premise of their realistic superhero shows. That's, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why the Iron Fist show failed the way that it did. Obviously, there were other reasons, but it was trying to juggle a lot of things at once. It had to set the stage for the Defenders while also trying to tell its own story. It needed to stay grounded like the shows that came before it, but also established a lot of the mythical side of things like Kunlun, Shao Lao, and of course the Hand. Only it felt like the people involved didn't really care about any of that. It resulted in a show that had a lot of potential, but it didn't really know what to do with it. Not to mention, whenever they did try to incorporate the mythical elements into it, particularly when it came to the Hand, it seemed to go directly against things that were already established in the Daredevil show. A show that had been praised to hell and back at that point. Going against it was not going to do them any favors. For example, the concept of introducing different factions within the Hand, all of which are in charge of one aspect of the organization, is pretty interesting, only it's undermined by the fact that Madame Gao, a character who we met in Daredevil, is leading one of those factions. Because I'm pretty sure that was not the original plan, at all. We meet her in Season 1 of Daredevil as one of Fisk's allies, assisting him in his control over New York. Only we also have Nobu, who was undoubtedly meant to be part of the Hand from the start. So why would the Hand need two of their members dealing with Fisk, you know? Did they even know they were both part of the Hand? Those are questions that did not have to exist, but they do, because apparently the writing teams didn't communicate much. After the Defenders, I thought this was all behind us. It was a disaster, so we're never gonna see the Hand again. We're gonna move on and fight different villains, you know? Like Kingpin, and of course, Kingpin. But now they're back, in the most unlikely of places, a Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man has fought the Hand in the comics, but he's not really a character I'd associate with them. At least, not as much as Daredevil, for example. But it could go a long way in redeeming them in the MCU and allow for some more mythical elements to finally make their way into the lore. There are many pieces in place that even seem to be pointing at a specific storyline, Shadowland. But I'll save that story and my thoughts on it for a different video. Until then, let me ask you this. What do you think their role will be moving forward? Do you think I'm right about Shadowland? Do you even want them to adapt Shadowland? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're new. And here's another video YouTube thinks you might be interested in, so you should go check that out. I'll see you again next time. Bye bye.